Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this this webinar that we've pulled together. Really appreciate everybody logging in. The goal is to start at 1:15 and we'll try and be done, or 1:15 local time, and we'll try and be done in about half an hour so that everyone can get back and get on with their lives. My name is Sean Brilliant. I'm a marine biologist and I work for the Canadian Wildlife Federation. I manage the National Marine Conservation Program. I'm based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Today I'm in Ottawa at the CWF headquarters. And I'm here to sort of host you today as we have a bit of a discussion with our special guest on the line, but not visual, I don't think, is William Winram. William, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming along. And so we'll get into this, once again, we'll get into this discussion. We'll do a presentation for the next 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor and try and answer any questions that anybody has. And in the meantime, if you have other questions beyond this webinar or you want to get into more specific discussions, then we encourage you to email CWF and contact us directly, and we'll see what we can do. So William, really wonderful to have you with us today. Really happy that you were able to find the time to do it. Just by a quick introduction, can you give us a bit of background about where you're coming from and what you do nowadays?
Well, I'm currently in Bimini, the Bahamas, and I'm here helping the Bimini Biological Field Station with a study that we talked about collaborating on last year. So we're placing tags on great hammerhead sharks for the researchers here. And that's what I'm doing a lot these days, is traveling around the globe helping scientists putting tags on sharks.
Yeah. And so one of the things that people may not realize is one of the reasons that you're well suited to this task is because of your athletic background. You're a free diver. So can you tell us a little bit about this sport and your involvement in that sport?
Well, I actually started freediving. I learned from my father. I grew up on the west coast of Canada, and I started diving in the cold, dark Canadian waters and loved it. Then I discovered the competitive sport in 2005, and been pursuing that, and then started wanting to start participating to ocean conservation. And I happen to be well suited to the work that we're doing. I'm a world record holder, so I've got a fairly decent breath hold, which allows me to stay under there sufficiently long enough to sneak up on the sharks.
So just to make sure people understand what freediving is, there's a variety of different variations of freediving, but what we're talking about here is an unassisted breath-holding dive, either a descent and or an ascent to specific depths. Is that what you'd call an accurate description of your sport?
Yeah, the competitive sport for sure, but any of you participating in the webinar, if you've ever gone snorkeling and taken a breath off the surface and ducked under to get a closer look at something, that's also freediving. It's just what we would call a recreational freediving.
And just so we know, because there's bound to be a question, can you tell us what your world record is?
It's 145 meters depth.
Pretty neat. So now you're involved got involved in shark research. Can you talk a little bit about what the characteristics, your experience and your skills as a freediver, how come that is so well suited to the work that you're doing in shark research now? Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, typically where we're working is with species that are difficult to approach. They're difficult to tag on scuba. The advantage that we have is that we're quiet. We don't make bubbles. We also have the ability to move freely up and down or horizontally, unlike scuba divers. Most scuba divers, if they are at a particular depth for any length of time, they cannot freely just surface. They need to do what are called decompression stops. And in terms of being able to move horizontally, because of all the equipment, they can't move very quickly. So it's hard for them to anticipate sharks. And for example, with scalloped hammerheads, which are the smaller hammerhead sharks, bubbles frighten them. So oftentimes we're asked to come in because we can, basically most of the dives that we do when we're tagging are on an exhale. So we're very quickly sinking. We make very little visual movement. We sink quickly, sneak up on the sharks, and place the tag. And it's been, for the most part, extremely difficult for most of the scientists that we're working with to do it on scuba, or in the case, for example, one of the scientists with the great white sharks, he's tried to do it from the boat, but very often the sharks don't want to come near the boat.
Right.
So we get in the water and tag them.
So what everyone is seeing online now, and William's not seeing because he's on the phone, is we've been playing a few videos from your white shark movie and some clips of the work you're doing now in Bimini where you're approaching the sharks, the hammerheads, and we can see. I mean, it's very fascinating to see that you're going down. You clearly have no scuba apparatus on. You're clearly doing it on one breath, whether it's an exhale or not, and you're able to approach these animals. I mean, it appears to be fairly close, and the animals don't appear too distressed or anything. Is that an accurate description?
Yes, most times. Occasionally there are the animals that, for example, the other day I was sneaking up on a very big female hammerhead shark, and I snuck up on her too well because at one point she turned and caught a glimpse of me and panicked and took off. So sometimes we startle them because we sneak up on them so well.
Wow. And this helps, of course, with the work you're doing currently in Bimini, but you've done in other parts of the world as well, where you're helping to tag these animals, correct?
Yes. It's the easiest way to tag them. And the other aspect of it, which I think is important, for some species, they're easy to catch on fishing line and bring to a boat and tag them that way. But for species like the hammerheads, they're very fragile. They don't survive those kinds of taggings very well. For big species like great white sharks, it's a monumental effort if you want to put a 5 to 6 meter great white shark on a rod and reel and try and bring it to a boat. Chances are you're not going to be successful, and if you are, you've exhausted that animal, and it's not healthy for the animal. So the easiest thing is for us to get in the water and sneak up on them and place a tag using a modified spear gun.
Yeah. So, and clearly, I mean, the other advantage I can see here is that as the animal's not trying to avoid you or dodge you or get out of the way, you're really able to be quite precise and put the tag on the animal without a lot of challenge to aim or anything else, it seems. It works really well.
Yeah, a lot of practice.
And you use a big stick. That seems like a pretty smart thing to do when you're dealing with sharks that are your size or larger.
Yeah, but oftentimes when we're done all the tagging, we really enjoy to get in the water, for example, with the great whites, with just our cameras and just interact with them. And in general, they're not aggressive with us. They're just actually quite shy and curious. Right.
So I want to talk about the sharks in a moment, but maybe just to touch on this tagging program. Can you talk about what the tagging is for and the value, the scientific value of the tags that you're attaching to these animals are for? Not only the hammerheads that you're working with right now, but also the other sharks that you've been involved in tagging.
In general, whenever we're doing this, it's not just for the sake of pure research. The research is usually targeting conservation questions. And for example, if we speak about the great hammerheads, very little is known about them, particularly in this area, where they're migrating to. Are they resident here? Are they migrating up the Florida coast? We know that the great hammerheads are found on the Florida coast, and they've been found as far up as, I believe, New Jersey. But we don't know if it's the same animals. And the problem here is that when you look at longline fisheries, hammerheads are very often found dead on those long lines. And if we're going to protect them, if we can understand their migratory patterns, if we can understand from January to April, they're in the Bahamas. From April through to September, they're migrating up the coast. Then in collaborating with governments and fisheries departments, we can, for example, put bans on longline fishing during their migratory season so that the odds of them getting caught and therefore killed as bycatch is reduced. And it's really about conserving and protecting these animals because they are endangered. And, with the great whites, it's the same thing. We're trying to understand exactly, where they're traveling to when they leave Guadalupe Island, Mexico, or the Farallon Islands in Northern California. It's to understand their patterns of movement to be able to enact legislation to protect them.
Yeah. This, I want to elaborate on this point a little bit. This is true of many animals in the world, and as technology improves with our ability to attach smaller and smaller tracking devices of animals, we're able to get a better sense of where animals are going. Knowing where the animals are is very important for us managing human activity so that we can make sure we aren't causing these sort of threats or conflicts, and so you're certainly contributing to it. I would also add that this type of research is, this type of tagging in particular is going on around the world, including here in Canada. There are a variety of tagging programs for wildlife that's going on, including sharks, and there are tagging programs for sharks that are taking place on both sides of, on both the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans in Canada as well. So this type of thing isn't something that's only occurring in far distant places, but also on our own shores and offshores as well. So William, one thing that people may notice as they're watching these videos is as you peacefully approach these enormous animals and poke them with a big stick, they give a quick jolt and run all of a sudden. I think one thing probably people are wondering is how much this may hurt or put the animal under duress. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, we're just actually talking with the lead scientist here. There's several studies that have come out that are showing that sharks don't feel pain, and I would tend to agree. I think what's happening when they get hit by the spear shaft is they're startled. And what we've observed with them in the water is that, I mean, imagine this, it's over 5 meters, it's a great white shark, it's probably one of the most feared and certainly the most vilified creature in the sea, yet it's afraid of us. If I move abruptly, if I, did a motion to clap my hands under the water, without the sound, that violent motion will scare them off. And the reason being is that they're worried about getting hurt. They don't want to get hurt. They oftentimes get beaten up when they're trying to predate on elephant seals. So, what we're doing, the design of the gun and the spear shaft that we're using is designed only to penetrate into the shark's muscle tissue. We've seen in taking tissue samples using a different type of spear shaft that takes basically a plug of it takes the skin and the underlying muscle tissue out, that within 48 hours it's healed over. You can see the scar. They're incredibly resilient animals. And because we're not fishing them, we're not adding that extra stress, we usually see them come back about 15 to 20 minutes later, and they seem completely unbothered.
Well, that's pretty telling that if you're certainly seeing these individuals return and not being too fearful of you, it's certainly telling that it's obviously not damaging them too much. And despite their reaction, I agree, it's probably not, it doesn't look like it's anything more than they're getting their fin pierced as opposed to getting an ear pierced or something, and there's bound to be some discomfort, but clearly, hopefully no lasting effects. So let's come back and talk a little bit about sharks. I'm sure one of the things that people are often thinking, particularly with these images of you swimming with these 4 and 5 meter long white sharks, is what a terrifying thing this must be. These are, as you said, vilified and demonized animals in this world, and there are a few people who have an opportunity to experience them in the way that you've had an opportunity to see them and interact with them. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that I'm guessing there'll be a number of people in the audience here that are frightened of sharks, and so you understand I didn't start without fear of sharks. When I saw the film Jaws, I was afraid to go swimming in the lake. And my first encounter happened to be, by chance, a 4.5 meter tiger shark, which scared the bejesus out of me. I was certain I was going to be eaten alive because everything that I'd ever read when I studied sharks said that tiger sharks were man-eaters. But really what happened in that encounter was she, because she was a big female, demonstrated herself to be very shy, very curious, and not once in the entire 800-meter swim that I had to do to get back to the beach did she ever aggress me. And it was actually that encounter that kind of really sparked my curiosity to spend whatever vacations I had to try and go to places where I could have the best chance of diving with sharks. And when you talk about great white sharks, Fred Boyle, who is also in the IMAX film, and you'll see him in some of the clips, him and I work together a lot, tagging sharks. we were discussing, we dove at the time. We decided to get in the water without a cage or without any protective devices with the great whites. We'd already dove with 20 different species of sharks, and we guesstimated that it was possible because there was a similarity in the behavior between the different species. And actually, the first time we dove with them was in South Africa. The visibility was only 4 meters. If the sharks we dove with wanted to predate on us, they had every opportunity, yet they didn't. And since now it's been 7-8 years diving just with the whites.
Yeah. Right. I think the work that you're doing, and certainly what the videos here are showing, really flies counter to what many people's reactions are to sharks. Hopefully, most of the people who are in the webinar recognize this, that these are a type of animal that have sort of been misaligned and malaligned in many ways because of their reputation and because of fictional stories, and because they are big animals and big predators, and they do have the capacity to be dangerous to us. What's really impressive to see and wonderful to see in your videos is sort of the calm and the peaceful nature of these things, and to be able to recognize that they are a large animal that needs to be respected, and perhaps you need to show some caution around, but they are not the monster that most fiction stories and in fact in some ways educators and television and popular media tend to create. These are in some ways over zealous descriptions of these animals, I think.
Or in many cases, it's an exploitation, because the great white shark, as an example, it's what's called an ambush predator. It has its best chance of predating on, say, a sea lion by ambushing it. And the moment the sea lion knows that the great white is there, the great white has little chance of predating on it. So if you put a little bit of fish blood in the water, they're very sensitive to it, because that means a potential meal for them. So they become, they move into this heightened state of awareness. And what they do for a lot of programs is they dump gallons of blood in the water, and they tease the sharks to get them into this overstimulated state, and then they start filming and photographing, which gives a false sense of what they're like. Because, the reality is, if they were really like how they're portrayed in Shark Week or in Jaws, there's no way we'd be able to do what we do.
Yeah, certainly a lot of sensationalizing.
Yes, and I was going to say, by the same token, they're not cute, cuddly animals, and I've got over 25 years experience diving with them. There are risks in diving with great white sharks, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. But the point we're trying to make with these images is that, as you say, they're not these crazed human killing machines that they've been made out to be.
Right. The same could be said for just about any large species of wildlife that humans interact with, whether it is a predator like a shark or a polar bear, or simply a large mammal like caribou or a big cow you need to be careful around. These are living things that you need to respect and be cautious around. I'll make one point. Of course, many of our guests on this webinar are from Canada, are Canadians. Sharks are a very common species in Canada as well. We have probably between 25 and 30 species of shark that we know of that occur on the Atlantic and Pacific coasts in our country. And that's a sort of a total species. In reality, in sense of what's more common, there's probably more like 6 to 8 species that are very common on the Atlantic and the Pacific coast. And these include things like the white shark, the great white sharks that you're seeing in the video, blue sharks. We even occasionally have things like hammerheads, but we have species threshers and makos. We occasionally have rare species like sharp nose and oceanic white tips. So there are many, many species of shark that occur within Canada. The species that William is working on right now, the greater hammerhead, does not occur in Canadian waters. As far as I know, it's not been found, although we have seen other species of hammerhead. But we do have quite a diversity of sharks that live in our oceans and waters, and therefore they are a part of our wildlife heritage, and they are a part of our responsibility to look after and to be stewards of. And this is something that's really worthwhile keeping in people's minds, and understanding that these are animals that are out there. We don't spend as much time in the ocean as they do in warm parts of the world, such as Bimini or Australia, where sharks have much more attention. And that might be part of the reason that they're even further out of sight and out of mind. And as is the same with many marine species, we need to be very careful that we're not excluding these animals from our consideration when we look at development and the role of our activities on the world's oceans. And I think William would agree. I mean, the role of sharks and predators in general in the oceans is probably a very important thing and something worthwhile conserving. Would you agree, William?
Absolutely. They're crucial to the health of our oceans. And we've seen in different parts around the globe when you remove sharks completely, for example, from a reef system, within 12 to 18 months, the coral reef dies out. So when you look at the fact that 50% of the oxygen in the air we're breathing, no matter whether you live in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Vancouver, Ottawa, or otherwise, 50% of the oxygen in the air we're breathing is coming from the sea. It's pretty important that we keep the sea functioning optimally. And sharks, that's one of their main roles as an apex predator.
Right. And important, you make an important point. I mean, not everybody in Canada has the fortune of living or interacting with an ocean, but the reality is that we all actually have an effect on the ocean, and we're all reliant on making sure that this ocean ecosystem continues to function in a normal way, and that it is the oceans that is part of the reason why we're able to live on this planet in the first place, and it has such a diversity of life in it. And the work that you're showing and the videos that we're seeing here are hopefully striking people and demonstrating why there is such value and such beauty in these animals and something worth conserving.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think what we'll do now, we're just coming up to the end of this little chat, and I'm going to run through a few questions that we've received beforehand, and I see some people are starting to write questions on, and please go ahead. And we'll just try and answer them as quickly as possible. If you're looking for more detail, please do contact us, and we'll try and direct you and make sure we get you the information that's necessary. So here's a quick question for you, William. This came in from during the registrations. Students were wondering, what threat do sharks pose to us when we are swimming in the Bahamas or the Caribbean? We've talked a little bit about this, but I wonder if you can address it specifically, maybe.
Yeah, so first things first, if you're going to go anywhere, you should do your research beforehand, what species of sharks are there. Find out as much information as you can. You might want to contact dive operators. Are there specific areas where they see different species of sharks more frequently than others? Talk to the locals. If you're staying at a hotel, talk to them. Gather as much information as possible. Now, the difference between swimmers and us diving is they're typically not looking out for the sharks. And what I suggest, whenever you're in the water, if I'm swimming, I'm shoulder checking. So I'm not only looking where I'm swimming, but I'm looking behind me, because most sharks will sneak up behind you because they're curious. They don't want to get injured, but they want to have a look. And as soon as you make eye contact and turn towards them, they usually take off because they're like, ooh, you've caught me. Okay, I'm leaving now. So that's my recommendation with regard to that question.
I think that's a good point. A next quick question, and I'll have you respond as well, and I'll elaborate as well. What is the best thing we can do in the Great Lakes region of Ontario to help protect sharks, water, and oceans? That's a good question.
It's a very good question. Well, don't use plastic bags. Anything that you can do that reduces your impact on the environment. When you're brushing your teeth, turn the water off while you're brushing your teeth. Be mindful of what you're using to wash your dishes with, what you're using to, clean the toilet. All of these things can eventually wind up in the Great Lakes. If you want to have an impact specifically on shark species, you can go online and find out, look for nonprofits that are doing shark-specific conservation work and contribute to them. But I think the biggest thing is figuring out how you can fulfill your obligation as a human being better. Recycling is really important. And then, sharing that with your friends and family, helping others discover what we say blind spot, what you're not noticing that you could be doing better, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think I would agree. And I think that last part, just as you said, is very important. Many of the people who are participating in the webinar today are probably doing this, but it's so important to become educated and aware of what the issues are and what the threats are. to look at your own blind spots in your life where you may be contributing to these, and then, just as William was saying, to communicate and influence people around you, not only your family and friends, but also decision makers. You know, we all have a role. These sharks, the sharks in Canada, the 12 to 16 common species and the other 12 rare species that occur in Canada, these are a part of our wildlife heritage and something that we all need to get involved in making decisions about. So next question. Sorry, I'll just move right on here. I got a couple more on the screen here. So one question someone had said in, what effects of climate change can be seen in shark behavior, biology, population sizes, and range sizes? That's a very good question and a very challenging question. I'd suggest that is a question many scientists are grappling with right now. The effect of climate change and its role on wildlife and distribution of species in the world is something that we're only beginning to get a grasp on. I don't think we can answer that question very well, except to say the work that William is doing right now, tagging the sharks so that we're capable of understanding where they're moving, will help contribute to that question. What is the biggest threat to shark populations? William, can you answer that one?
Yes, human beings. We kill them for their fins. We kill them as bycatch in the fishing industry. We kill them out of ignorance, like they're doing in Australia with the shark cull. We kill them to protect humans so we can go and recreate in the sea. Yeah. So, I mean, pretty much the big threat is humanity.
Right. And a lot of the time, beyond those other reasons, we're a threat to sharks in ways that we don't even realize. For example, we end up catching them when we're aiming to catch other species, and the amount of damage that we can do to their population is something often we don't even understand, but clearly has an important impact. Next question, why should students care about sharks, or those students who are terrified of them? Well, hopefully we've answered some of that. I don't know, can you give a quick elaboration on that question as well, William?
Well, I think that steers back to what I said earlier. 50% of the oxygen in the air we breathe on planet Earth comes from the sea. 25% of the protein that people consume in their daily diet comes from the sea. Our lives, whether they're living next to the sea or otherwise, are intricately connected to the sea, and sharks are crucial to the health of the oceans. We know it. There's no doubt. There's no debate left. And right now, most of the big pelagic species of sharks that are, sharks that roam the world's oceans, great whites, tiger sharks, great hammerheads, etc., have had their numbers reduced by upwards of 90%. Many of them are on the brink of extinction. And as I said earlier, I've seen ecosystems where the sharks have been completely eradicated and the ecosystem fails. And I'm more afraid of a world without sharks than a world with sharks. They're crucial to our own survival, in my opinion.
Yep. And you've essentially answered the next question. Mrs. Evangelista's Fantastic Fours, really cool, have a question. What should we be concerned about when vacationing in the Bahamas, Caribbean with regard to any dangers posed by sharks? And I think William answered this a little bit earlier. A little bit of knowledge goes a long way, and of course being cautious when you're in the water is going to help address that as well. The next question I see here, do sharks ever eat prey larger than themselves? William?
Yes, they eat whales, but they don't consume the thing whole. They take pieces of it. So yes.
Yep, that's right. And often you'll have sharks that'll gather around a dead whale that's floating because they'll be eating off of it as well. They will definitely scavenge animals and prey much larger than themselves. So the answer there is yes. They can also take out larger prey than themselves because they can damage and injure and eventually consume larger marine mammals that exist in the ocean. So that's another way that they may do it. Let me see what we have for another question here. Can you explain the difference between a rare shark and an endangered shark? Okay, well, I'll just mention this one very quickly. Rare and endangered are both essentially meaning that there are not very many of these species left around. I guess in this case, rare and endangered can mean the same thing because they're not very common, so they have low abundance. If they're endangered, it means not only are they in low abundance, but they are in imminent risk of going extinct. Animals can be rare which means there's not very many of them, but they're not necessarily under threat of going extinct. If an animal is endangered, that sort of suggests it's usually at a significant level of possible extinction. So a quick answer there. What varieties of sharks, if any, are becoming endangered? William?
Most.
I
Most
would agree.
species of sharks are moving in that direction.
There doesn't seem to be any sort of one class. I agree. Probably the largest species were taken out first, which is typical of how we humans tend to operate. But at the same time, even the smaller species are being taken out because of bycatch issues and so on. So it's difficult to say. Next question. What is the largest shark in the world? That's a good one. Do you have the answer, William?
Whale shark.
Hey, good answer. Yes, largest shark in the world. Also the largest fish in the world as well. Beautiful species. Have you ever dove with the whale shark, William?
Yes, I love them. They're great, especially if you get them when they want to be, say, petted or scratched. You can't get away from them. They'll follow you all the way back to the boat, and then they'll keep swimming around the boat till you get back in and scratch their heads.
Amazing.
Very cool, especially when they're 8 meters long.
Very jealous. And just for a note, in case anyone doesn't know, hopefully you're going to go look up what a whale shark is. Whale sharks are filter feeders. These are not predatory animals like most sharks are well known. This is the largest fish in the ocean, the largest whale, and it actually consumes phytoplankton, as does the second largest, which is the basking shark. Okay, let's see what we have for another question here. We're just blowing through them before we run out of time. What is the smallest species of shark in the world? That is a good question.
I'm taking a guess, and I'm just going to answer this with the smallest species I've ever dove with is the cat shark. And these guys are really cute. They're tiny. They're not even, maybe a foot long, but probably not. And if you get close enough to just touch them with a finger, they make themselves into a donut, and they hide their heads under their tail. And they think that that's protecting them. And it's so funny and cute. They're really cool little creatures.
It's amazing.
They hide in the kelp beds.
That's pretty neat. I think maybe we'll just take this one last question. We have many other questions that are coming in. What we can do maybe is see if we have a chance to send a few answers off, but we really appreciate you sending in the questions. And okay, so I'm going to do two quick last questions. So one, can I see that top one there? Roger. So why do hammerheads seem to always travel near the bottom of the ocean floor? Do you have an answer for that, William?
That's not necessarily true. The scalloped hammerheads travel in large schools, and they take up a huge portion of the water column. So you can see them, say, from 15 meters down to 60 meters. And that's when you have these big schools of 800 or more individuals. The great hammerheads tend to cruise along the bottom because they're looking for their prey. Here in Bimini, they hunt stingrays, and stingrays are on the bottom. So they're following scent trails. They're looking for, sometimes even go in the mangroves, looking for baby lemon sharks to predate on them.
Yep. Okay, so just last question, just because a number of these questions have come in, and we'll try and get back to everybody, and I'm very conscious of letting everyone go. We have a number of questions from O'Neill, CBI. What education, jobs, or volunteering should a student pursue if they are interested in working with sharks and sharks conservation? They'd like to know if there are volunteer positions in shark tagging programs that they can take part in, particularly in the Caribbean. Are you aware of any of these, William? Can you respond to this?
Yeah, the Bimini Biological Field Station, which is the station that we're collaborating with, they have volunteer programs for students. They have research experiences that they offer. There's a huge number of people that want these spots, so they're not easy to come by. We're talking about collaborating to offer school kids the opportunity to come down and, for example, learn to free dive, learn about the shark research being conducted here, take tours of the lab, go out on the boat, see the sharks, get to be in the water with the sharks, etc., and let young people get exposed to these kinds of things.
Yeah. I would add to that certainly people can always look for opportunities to volunteer or participate in conservation programs in general, or particular marine or ocean conservation programs. And one thing I'll add is that you don't need to be a marine biologist to do ocean conservation. You know, you can be a teacher and love the ocean and do great things for the ocean. You can be a computer scientist. You can be a bus driver. It doesn't matter. If you have an appreciation and knowledge of the ocean, you will be able to contribute to that, and you'll be able to contribute to conservation in that way. And if you're really interested in doing some of this amazing stuff, for example, that we've been watching William do, then you need to pursue these further opportunities and to volunteer and train and to become more knowledgeable as well. So please keep that in mind as well. I think I'd like to
add something in that?
Go ahead, William. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a marine biologist. I'm a freediver, and I don't bring any science to the table here. What I bring is my background and experience in the water, diving with sharks for most of my life. So as you're saying, you don't have to be a marine biologist. Anyone can get involved in ocean conservation. You just have to, you know, have the interest and the passion to pursue it.
That's right. Great example to that point. So just to wrap up here, and I want to mention some of the. So I'm going to mention a couple things. First of all, please do keep in mind that sharks are a part of our marine wildlife species, our marine wildlife heritage here in Canada. We have many shark species that occur in our waters and many other species beyond that. These are amazing animals that live in our world that deserve our respect and that we need to be cautious around, like many other species, particularly because they are out of sight and out of mind, and particularly because there are so many misinterpretations and a lack of understanding of what these animals are and that they deserve our attention and conservation efforts as well. I'd like to just conclude as well with William. William's also involved with the IUCN, and you are the Oceans Ambassador, is that correct, William?
Yes. Yeah.
And so the IUCN is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Can you talk just very briefly about your work with the IUCN in general, which I know involves this shark work, but the work that you're involved with there?
Yeah, basically we're trying to collaborate to expand the type of tagging work that we're able to offer scientists to network through the IUCN's network of research projects around the globe, but also because the media material that we have, the photos and the videos are so unique, it's also a way of us lending that media to them to attract a bigger audience of people and to engage people on a more global scale about sharks and their plight. And in particular, one of the premises that we've always followed was that if you are terrified of something, if you don't like it, if you view the animal as evil, you're certainly never going to invest to protect it. And what we've been trying from the get-go to get people to realize is that sharks are not evil, not at all. And they're not out there hunting human beings. They're just out there trying to survive against the onslaught of us human beings. So we're collaborating a lot around those kinds of issues.
Right. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up there because we've kept everybody even longer than I expected. This is what tends to happen when I start talking about marine wildlife, and especially when we have an amazing guest like William online here. We have many classes and individuals who've stuck with us through this webinar and listened to our conversation. William, I'll give you a chance for a last word. Anything you'd like to say to the classes and groups who are involved in our webinar today?
Thanks for tuning in. It was a real pleasure. And I look forward to being able to do this again sometime in the future.
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you for your time, William. I hope you have a good swim today if you're getting in the water, and best of luck with the work that you're working on. Thank you, everybody, for your time and logging on today and dealing with our technology. We really appreciate your questions. We'll see if we have an opportunity to at least get a quick answer off to those of you that we didn't get a chance to answer the questions that you've posted. And in the meantime, if you have other questions or need to contact us directly, please do, and we will try and make sure we get you that information. So thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your time. I apologize for going a bit overboard, but I appreciate your patience and indulging us in an opportunity to talk about this and talk about these wildlife species. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. Bye now, William.